Your soulmate just solved a high-profile case, and the one arrested was my beloved child. Your soulmate just solved the case that had investigators, reporters, and an entire city searching for answers, and when the handcuffs finally closed around the person responsible, your soulmate went completely still. Not because the case was over. Not because cameras were flashing outside the building. But because they recognized the person being arrested. For weeks, your soulmate had followed tiny inconsistencies everyone else dismissed, a timestamp that didn't match, a statement that changed by only 3 words, and one photograph containing something almost invisible in the background. Those clues eventually pointed toward someone nobody wanted to suspect. Someone who had been standing close enough to the truth to control what everyone believed. But there was another reason your soulmate couldn't look away when that person was escorted past them. The arrested person had a connection to you, and your soulmate had discovered that connection only minutes before the arrest. Until that moment, your soulmate had kept your name completely separate from the investigation. Then an investigator placed a sealed evidence folder on the table and quietly said, "You need to see this before we move." Inside were financial records, old photographs, handwritten notes, and one document carrying a name your soulmate knew instantly, yours. Their stomach dropped. Suddenly, several strange decisions made by the suspect began making sense. Certain places had not been chosen randomly. Certain dates were not coincidences. And one unexplained message investigators had recovered weeks earlier appeared to have been written specifically about you. Your soulmate reread it twice, trying to understand why someone connected to such a high-profile case would know anything about your life. Then they noticed something even more unsettling. The message had been written long before your soulmate became involved in the investigation. Don't skip, because what happened next changed the meaning of the entire case. Your soulmate immediately demanded to know where the document had come from, but the answer created an even bigger mystery. Investigators had recovered it from a locked compartment belonging to the suspect, hidden beneath evidence everyone originally believed was unrelated. Your soulmate stared through the interview room glass as the arrested person sat silently on the other side, refusing every question. Then, without warning, the suspect lifted their head and looked directly toward the glass, as though somehow they knew your soulmate was standing there. A detective entered the room carrying the folder. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the detective placed your name on the table. The suspect's expression changed instantly. They leaned forward and finally spoke, but instead of explaining the case, they asked one chilling question: "Does your investigator know who that person really is?" Your soulmate's heart pounded, because the detective hadn't revealed their identity. And then the suspect said something that made your soulmate realize the arrest had uncovered a secret far bigger than anyone expected. "Ask them who connects all 3 of us." The room seemed to shrink around your soulmate as those words settled into the silence. "All 3 of us." The detective immediately asked the suspect what that meant, but instead of answering, they leaned back and gave a strange, knowing look toward the glass. Your soulmate's mind raced through every piece of evidence they had studied over the past several weeks. 3 people. You. The person sitting in custody. And your soulmate. There had never been an obvious connection between all 3, at least, none they knew about. Then your soulmate remembered the photograph that had first broken the case open. Investigators had focused on the figure in the foreground, but your soulmate had noticed something reflected in a window behind them. Now they pulled that photograph up again and enlarged the reflection. This time, they noticed something they had completely missed before, a familiar symbol on a folder being carried by someone standing just outside the frame. That symbol matched the mark printed on one of the documents containing your name. Suddenly, your soulmate understood that your appearance in the evidence wasn't accidental. Someone had deliberately created a trail connecting you to events you may never have known were happening. But why? Your soulmate requested every record associated with that symbol, expecting perhaps a company, an organization, or an old legal file. Instead, investigators discovered that the symbol belonged to a private archive that had supposedly been closed years earlier. Stranger still, access records showed that someone had entered that archive recently using credentials connected to the arrested suspect. Your soulmate felt another piece click into place, but it created a frightening new question. The suspect hadn't merely known about you. They had been searching for information about you. And according to the access log, they weren't the only person who had opened your file. Your soulmate asked investigators to identify the second person immediately. For several tense minutes, technicians searched through archived security records while the suspect remained silent in the interview room. Then one investigator suddenly stopped typing. "We found something," they said. Your soulmate stepped closer to the screen and saw footage from several months earlier. A figure entered the archive, approached the exact cabinet containing your records, and remained there for nearly 20 minutes. Their face was partially hidden, but when they turned toward the camera, your soulmate recognized them. Not from the investigation. From somewhere far more personal. Someone your soulmate had seen around you before. Someone who had always seemed completely harmless. And when investigators finally pulled up that person's identity, your soulmate realized the arrested suspect wasn't the only one hiding something, because the second name belonged to someone you trusted. Your soulmate stared at the name on the screen, hoping there had been some mistake, but the security footage left little room for doubt. The person entering that private archive was someone who had been part of your world for years, a trusted family friend who had always seemed protective, dependable, and completely removed from anything suspicious. Yet there they were, opening your file months before the high-profile case had even reached the public. Your soulmate immediately asked investigators to locate them, but another discovery stopped everyone cold. The person's phone had been switched off less than 30 minutes after the arrest became public. Their last recorded location wasn't their home, workplace, or anywhere investigators expected. It was near the building where your soulmate had found the clue that finally solved the case. That coincidence was too precise to ignore. Your soulmate returned to the evidence board and began rebuilding the timeline from the beginning. The arrested suspect had accessed your records first. Weeks later, the person you trusted entered the same archive. Then came a series of unexplained meetings, carefully timed messages, and movements around locations connected to the investigation. But one detail didn't fit: the two people appeared to be working against each other, not together. Your soulmate noticed that every time the arrested suspect moved closer to uncovering something about your past, the trusted person appeared shortly afterward, almost as though they were trying to erase the trail. Stay till the end, because this wasn't beginning to look like a conspiracy against you. It looked like two people fighting over a secret neither wanted your soulmate to discover. Then the detective returned to the interview room with one photograph taken from your archived file. The moment it touched the table, the suspect's confidence disappeared. "Who is this?" the detective asked. For the first time since the arrest, the suspect looked genuinely shaken. After several seconds, they quietly replied, "That's the reason this whole case started." Your soulmate moved closer to the glass. The photograph showed you standing beside another person many years earlier, but part of that person's face had been deliberately removed from the image. Investigators turned the photograph over and found handwriting on the back, a date, an address, and 4 words that made your soulmate's pulse race. They were never told. Before anyone could ask what you had never been told, an officer rushed into the room with urgent news. The person you trusted had just been found, and they were carrying the missing half of that photograph. The missing half of that photograph changed everything the moment investigators placed it beside the first piece. The torn edges matched perfectly, revealing the face that had been deliberately removed years ago. Your soulmate leaned closer, expecting a stranger. Instead, the person in the picture carried a resemblance to someone connected to the investigation, subtle at first, but impossible to ignore once the detective pointed it out. The trusted family friend had been questioned immediately after being found, yet they refused to explain why they had carried that photograph for so long. They only repeated one sentence: "I was trying to keep the truth from reaching the wrong person." Your soulmate demanded to know who the wrong person was. The answer didn't come. Instead, investigators discovered something tucked behind the photograph, an old storage receipt bearing the same address written on the back. Within minutes, your soulmate was comparing that address against the case timeline. It belonged to a property that had changed owners several times and had seemingly nothing to do with the investigation. But records revealed one astonishing detail: the arrested suspect had visited that exact location shortly before the event that launched the high-profile case. Your soulmate realized the property might contain whatever both people had been searching for. Investigators obtained access and entered the building expecting old files or forgotten belongings. What they found was far more important: a locked metal box containing photographs, correspondence, and documents carefully preserved for years. Almost every item pointed toward the same hidden chapter of your past. Then your soulmate found an unopened envelope with your full name written across the front. The date on it showed that someone had intended for you to receive it years ago. Your soulmate didn't open the envelope immediately. Something about the trusted person's warning made them hesitate. Instead, they returned to the interview room and placed it where the arrested suspect could see it. The reaction was instant. "Where did you find that?" the suspect asked, suddenly losing every trace of composure. Your soulmate finally entered the room personally and asked the question everyone had been avoiding: "Why is this person involved?" The suspect stared at them for a long moment before answering. "Because they were never supposed to know what happened that night." Then they pointed toward the envelope and added, "And if you open that, you'll understand why someone spent years making sure they didn't." Your soulmate looked down and noticed something written beneath your name in faded ink: 2 initials. The same initials belonged to the person whose disappearance had quietly become the hidden center of the entire case. Those 2 initials forced your soulmate to revisit the one detail investigators had treated as background information from the very beginning: The person attached to them had disappeared years earlier, long before the current case attracted national attention, and their absence had eventually been written off as a voluntary departure. But the envelope suggested something else. Your soulmate requested the original disappearance file and immediately noticed that several pages were missing from the archived copy. More troubling, the officer who had signed the final report had later worked closely with someone connected to the person you trusted. Suddenly, an old disappearance and the newly solved high-profile case were no longer separate stories. They were two ends of the same thread, and your name had been sitting quietly between them the entire time. Your soulmate finally opened the envelope with investigators present. Inside was a handwritten letter, a small key, and a photograph dated 3 days before the disappearance. The letter didn't explain everything. In fact, it created an even larger mystery. It said that if you were ever given the envelope, it meant the truth could finally be told without destroying an innocent life. Your soulmate stopped at those words. An innocent life. Yours? Someone else's? The letter continued with instructions leading to a safe deposit box registered under an unfamiliar name. But when investigators searched that name, they discovered it wasn't random. It had appeared once before, buried inside the financial records that helped your soulmate solve the current case. The arrested suspect had transferred money to that name repeatedly for years. Your soulmate returned to the suspect with the letter and asked what those payments were really for. This time, the suspect didn't hide behind silence. Protection, they said. The detective asked who had been protected, but the suspect looked directly at your soulmate instead. The person you're investigating isn't who you think. Then came the detail nobody expected. According to the suspect, the person who disappeared years ago had never actually vanished without explanation. Someone had helped them leave after they discovered evidence powerful people desperately wanted buried. Your soulmate asked whether that person was still alive. The suspect hesitated, then whispered, "They were when I last saw them." Before your soulmate could ask when that had been, another investigator entered carrying the safe deposit records. The box had been accessed only once in recent years, 3 days ago, and the signature belonged to the same trusted person investigators had just found. 3 days ago meant the trusted person had known this moment was coming before your soulmate solved the case. That realization sent investigators straight back into the interview room, where the family friend finally stopped pretending the safe deposit box meant nothing. They admitted taking something from it, but insisted they hadn't done it to hide evidence. "I was told to remove one thing if anyone started asking about the past," they said. Your soulmate immediately asked who had given that instruction. The person lowered their eyes and answered with the 2 initials from the envelope. The room fell silent. If that statement was true, then the person everyone believed had disappeared years ago had remained in contact with someone close to you, and may have known that your soulmate would eventually uncover the truth. But the biggest surprise came when investigators asked what had been removed from the box. It wasn't money, photographs, or another letter. It was a small digital recorder containing one conversation. The trusted person had hidden it nearby and reluctantly agreed to surrender it. Your soulmate listened as technicians recovered the recording. At first, there was only static. Then 2 voices emerged. One belonged to the arrested suspect. The other was older, quieter, and unmistakably frightened. "If anything happens," the second voice said, "make sure the truth reaches them when they're ready." Your soulmate's attention sharpened when your name followed. Then came a statement that completely changed the motive behind the high-profile case. Someone had been using the old disappearance to pressure people for years, and the current scandal had begun because the arrested suspect finally decided to expose them. Suddenly, solving the case no longer felt like reaching the finish line. Your soulmate had uncovered the outer layer of something that had been protected for years. They asked technicians to identify when the recording was made, expecting it to be old. The timestamp stunned everyone. It was less than 18 months ago. That meant the supposedly vanished person had been alive recently enough to record this warning, and someone had intentionally kept that fact from you. Then the trusted family friend quietly said, "There's something else you need to understand. I wasn't protecting the person who disappeared. I was protecting you from what their return would reveal." Your soulmate turned toward them. "Reveal what?" The family friend hesitated before finally answering, "Why your name was changed in the original records." And suddenly, your soulmate understood that the mystery wasn't simply about someone from your past. It was about who the record said you had been before anyone knew you by your current name. Your soulmate felt the investigation shift beneath their feet. A changed name wasn't something that could be dismissed as another strange detail, especially when the original records had been deliberately removed. Investigators searched older databases and eventually recovered a scanned document that had escaped deletion. The date matched the period immediately following the mysterious disappearance. Your current name appeared on one side. On the other was a different name, followed by a notation stating that the record had been amended under confidential circumstances. Your soulmate asked who had authorized it. The answer brought everyone back to the high-profile case. The authorization carried the signature of a person whose organization had repeatedly appeared in the financial trail. The same organization the arrested suspect had spent years quietly investigating. The trusted family friend finally explained why they had remained silent. Years ago, they had been asked to protect documents concerning you until the person who disappeared could safely return. But that return never happened. Instead, powerful people began asking questions, records started disappearing, and anyone who knew too much was pressured into silence. Your soulmate listened carefully, noticing something important in the story. The family friend wasn't afraid of the arrested suspect. They were afraid of whoever the suspect had been trying to expose. That meant the arrest everyone celebrated as the solution to the case might have captured someone involved in wrongdoing, but not necessarily the person controlling everything. "Something huge is waiting for you," the family friend whispered, before revealing that one original document had never been placed in the archive at all. It had been hidden somewhere only you could unknowingly lead them to. Your soulmate demanded an explanation, and the family friend described an ordinary object that had apparently remained near you for years, something so familiar you would never think to examine it closely. Inside it, they claimed, was a sealed compartment containing the original record and a message from the person who disappeared. Investigators immediately prepared to recover it, but before anyone left, your soulmate received an urgent call from the evidence team. They had finished analyzing the digital recorder. Beneath the conversation was a second audio layer, faint enough to have been missed during the first playback. Technicians isolated it and discovered another person speaking in the background. Your soulmate recognized the voice immediately. It belonged to someone who had publicly helped investigators throughout the high-profile case, someone who was supposed to be on your soulmate's side. And on that recording, the person could clearly be heard saying your original name. Hearing that original name spoken by someone inside the investigation changed your soulmate's entire understanding of who could be trusted. The voice belonged to a respected official who had appeared beside investigators from the earliest days of the high-profile case, calmly offering information and helping shape the public story. Yet the recording proved this person had known about you long before your soulmate ever entered the investigation. Your soulmate quietly asked technicians not to reveal what they had discovered. Then they checked every piece of evidence that official had personally handled. A pattern emerged almost immediately. Important documents had been delayed. Certain witnesses had been questioned unusually late. And one crucial report, the report that originally made the arrested suspect look unquestionably responsible, had passed through that official's hands before anyone else saw it. Your soulmate suddenly realized why the suspect had seemed almost relieved after being arrested. They had been waiting to get inside a controlled interview room, away from whoever had been watching them outside. When your soulmate confronted them privately, the suspect finally confirmed it. You solved the case they wanted you to solve, they said. Now solve the one underneath it. They admitted responsibility for part of what investigators had uncovered, but insisted the larger operation belonged to someone else. Then they revealed why your original identity mattered. Years ago, the person who disappeared had discovered records showing that something valuable had been placed in your name. Not simply money. Not property. Evidence, protected through a legal arrangement that could only be opened if your original identity was proven. Someone had spent years making sure that proof remained buried. That was why the hidden object near you mattered. Your soulmate rushed to recover it before anyone inside the investigation realized what they knew. Inside the concealed compartment was exactly what the family friend had promised: an original identity record, a handwritten message, and a tiny sealed memory card. But the message contained only one instruction: watch this alone before you trust anyone. Your soulmate inserted the memory card into an isolated device. A video appeared, dated 18 months earlier. The person who had supposedly disappeared stepped into frame, older, nervous, but unmistakably alive. They spoke your original name first. Then they said, "If you're seeing this, someone finally connected the case to you." Your soulmate leaned closer as the person explained that the evidence everyone had been searching for was never stored in the safe deposit box. It had been hidden inside the high-profile case itself. Then came the sentence your soulmate wasn't prepared for: the person they arrest will know where to look, but the person who ordered everything has been standing beside the investigation from day one. Your soulmate replayed that final sentence, and suddenly every helpful gesture from the respected official looked different. The early phone calls. The carefully selected evidence. The insistence that investigators focus on one suspect while ignoring several inconsistencies. Your soulmate couldn't accuse anyone yet, suspicion wasn't proof. So they returned to the case file and followed the disappeared person's strangest clue: the evidence was inside the case itself. At first, that sounded impossible. Then your soulmate noticed that every major exhibit had been assigned an evidence number, except one photograph collected on the first night. Its number had been manually changed. When technicians retrieved the original intake record, they discovered the missing number belonged to an item nobody could locate, a sealed envelope submitted by an unidentified witness before the investigation officially began. The arrested suspect immediately recognized the number when your soulmate showed it to them. Their face tightened. "That's what this was always about," they said. Years earlier, the vanished person had gathered records capable of exposing a network of secret payments and manipulated documents. Knowing the evidence could disappear, they had separated it into pieces. One piece was tied to your original identity. Another had been placed where powerful people would eventually be forced to acknowledge it, inside an official investigation. But someone discovered the plan and built an entire false trail around that evidence, hoping investigators would close the case without ever noticing what was missing. Your soulmate had accidentally ruined that plan by solving too many inconsistencies. Now there was only one question that mattered: who removed the envelope from evidence storage? The answer arrived faster than anyone expected. Access logs showed only 3 people had entered the secured evidence room during the window when the envelope disappeared. 2 had documented reasons. The third was the respected official whose voice appeared on the recording. Your soulmate felt the pieces finally drawing together, but one detail prevented an immediate confrontation. The official hadn't left the building with the envelope. Security footage showed them entering empty-handed and leaving exactly the same way. Whatever they had done, the evidence was probably still somewhere inside headquarters. Your soulmate quietly ordered a restricted search while pretending nothing had changed. Minutes later, a technician called from a records room rarely used anymore. Behind a removable panel, they had discovered a sealed envelope bearing the missing evidence number. But your soulmate's relief vanished when they saw what was written across the front in the vanished person's handwriting. Open only when the arrested one tells you who they were protecting. Your soulmate carried the sealed envelope back to the interview room and placed it in front of the arrested suspect without saying a word. The reaction was immediate. Their shoulders dropped, as if a secret they had carried for years had finally caught up with them. "So you found it," they whispered. Your soulmate pointed to the handwritten instruction and asked the only question that mattered: who were you protecting? For several seconds, the suspect stared at the envelope. Then they answered, "The person whose disappearance started all of this." That made no sense. Investigators believed the vanished person had been hiding from the suspect. But the suspect revealed that years earlier, they had actually helped that person disappear after discovering the respected official was searching for the evidence connected to your original identity. The confession rewrote the entire timeline. The suspect admitted making secret payments, using false names, and misleading investigators, but claimed those actions had been designed to keep the vanished person hidden. That explained the suspicious financial records your soulmate had followed while solving the high-profile case. They looked incriminating because they were meant to. The suspect had deliberately allowed attention to fall on themselves whenever anyone moved too close to the larger secret. But something had changed recently. The vanished person contacted them after years of silence and warned that someone had discovered your connection to the evidence. Days later, the current case erupted into public view. Your soulmate suddenly understood why the suspect hadn't fought harder against the arrest. Being taken into custody placed them somewhere the respected official couldn't easily reach them. Only then did the suspect tell your soulmate to open the envelope. Inside were several original documents and a handwritten statement identifying who had controlled the hidden network years ago. Your soulmate scanned the first page, expecting the respected official's name. It wasn't there. Instead, the documents showed that the official had been following instructions from someone positioned even closer to the original events, someone whose signature appeared repeatedly beside your old identity records. Then your soulmate reached the final page and froze. Attached to it was a photograph of the vanished person standing beside the true organizer. The image was old but clear enough to identify both faces. Your soulmate recognized the second person immediately, because they had seen that face among the people connected to you. And beneath the photograph, the vanished person had written one final warning: if they discover who you really are, the first person they'll approach is the one you call family. That single word, family, made your soulmate hesitate before taking another step. The photograph didn't prove that everyone close to you had been involved, but it proved one person had been standing much nearer to the secret than anyone realized. Your soulmate compared the face in the old picture with archived records and discovered the connection. The person beside the vanished individual had once served as the legal representative responsible for changing your original records. Years later, that same person had quietly entered your family's circle under an entirely different professional role. The respected official wasn't the mastermind after all. They had been protecting this person's identity. And when investigators traced their recent communications, they found something chilling. The two had spoken less than an hour before your soulmate made the high-profile arrest. Your soulmate knew confronting either person too soon could destroy the remaining evidence, so they created a test. Investigators quietly circulated false information claiming the missing envelope had never been recovered. Then they waited. Within 20 minutes, the respected official left their office and made a call from a private hallway. Technicians couldn't hear the other side, but they captured one sentence clearly: they haven't found what connects the family yet. Your soulmate's suspicion hardened. Moments later, another investigator reported movement at the old property where the metal box had been discovered. Someone had arrived unexpectedly and entered through a rear door. Cameras captured the person's face. It was the individual from the photograph, the one who had spent years close enough to your family to know exactly what you had been told and, more importantly, what you hadn't. Investigators followed without revealing themselves. Inside the property, the person went directly to a section nobody had searched because it appeared permanently sealed. Behind an old wall panel was a narrow compartment containing one final file. Your soulmate watched remotely as the person removed it and opened the cover. On the first page was your original name. On the second was a confidential statement signed by the vanished person. But before investigators moved in, the person pulled out a phone and called someone. They solved the wrong case, they said quietly. If they connect this file to the arrest, they'll know why the identity was changed. Your soulmate gave the signal, and officers entered. The person didn't run. They simply placed the file down and said, "You still don't understand who I was protecting." Then your soulmate saw the final page, and the name written there revealed that the family connection wasn't what anyone had assumed. The name on that final page belonged to the vanished person themselves. Your soulmate stared at it, confused, until the detained family insider explained what the documents actually meant. Years ago, the identity change had not been designed to hide you from investigators or separate you from some inheritance. It had been created to prevent anyone from discovering your documented connection to the vanished person. That person had uncovered the network behind the secret payments and altered records, then realized that anyone legally connected to them could become leverage. So they made an impossible choice: disappear, remove the connection from accessible records, and leave you believing an incomplete version of your own history. The family insider claimed they had helped maintain that secret ever since. But your soulmate noticed something missing from the explanation. If everything had been done to protect you, why had the insider just tried to remove the final file? That question broke their composure. They admitted the truth was more complicated. The vanished person had originally ordered the records hidden, but 18 months ago, the same period when the video was recorded, they changed their mind. They wanted you to know everything. The insider disagreed, believing reopening the past would place you directly inside a conflict that had never truly disappeared. So when the vanished person prepared the evidence for your soulmate to eventually discover, the insider secretly began intercepting pieces of it. That was why documents vanished, why the archive had been accessed, and why the high-profile case contained clues that seemed deliberately misplaced. Two different plans had been unfolding at once. One person was trying to lead the truth toward you, while another was desperately trying to keep it away. Then your soulmate asked the question everyone had avoided for too long: where is the vanished person now? The insider looked toward the investigators and said they genuinely didn't know, but they knew how contact had been maintained. Every few months, a seemingly ordinary postcard arrived with no return address. Each contained a phrase that meant the person was safe. The most recent postcard, however, had been different. Your soulmate examined it and found only 6 words: "When the case breaks, follow home." On the reverse was a sequence of numbers investigators initially mistook for a postal code. Your soulmate recognized the pattern from the evidence numbers in the high-profile case. When arranged correctly, they pointed to one final archived exhibit. Investigators retrieved it and found an address hidden inside. And your soulmate went silent, because according to current records, someone was still living there under the vanished person's original name. The address led to a quiet house far outside the places investigators had been watching, registered through layers of ordinary paperwork that attracted no attention. Your soulmate refused to rush in. After everything they had uncovered, they knew one careless move could make the person inside disappear again. Investigators checked utility records, deliveries, and nearby cameras. Someone had definitely been living there, but almost entirely out of public view. Then a recent image surfaced from a delivery camera. Your soulmate compared the face with the 18-month-old recording and felt their pulse jump. It was the vanished person. Alive. Older, changed by years in hiding, but unmistakably the same. Yet the timestamp created another mystery: the footage had been captured that very morning. Hours before your soulmate made the arrest. Your soulmate approached the property with only 2 investigators, carrying copies of the recovered documents rather than arriving with a crowd. The front door was unlocked. Inside, The house looked recently occupied, a warm cup sat beside an open notebook, and a lamp remained on near the window. But the vanished person was gone. On the table lay a folder marked with the evidence number from the high-profile case. Your soulmate opened it and discovered something nobody had expected, a complete timeline documenting the respected official, the family insider, and the arrested suspect. Beside each name were explanations of what they had done and why. The arrested suspect had indeed protected the vanished person, but the file confirmed they had also crossed serious legal lines while doing it. The family insider had concealed evidence believing they were protecting you. And the respected official had manipulated the investigation to protect the person directing them. Then your soulmate turned the final page and discovered why the vanished person had left the house only hours earlier. A handwritten note said, "The arrest means the last person will finally move." Beneath it was a photograph taken recently outside a building your soulmate recognized immediately, the headquarters where the investigation had been conducted. In the picture stood the respected official beside someone investigators had never considered part of the case. The face was familiar because that person had appeared publicly after the case first became famous, presenting themselves as someone deeply concerned about finding the truth. Your soulmate looked closer and noticed they were holding the same distinctive folder seen in the reflection that originally cracked the case. Then a phone began ringing somewhere inside the empty house. Your soulmate found it hidden beneath the notebook and answered. A voice whispered, "You found my message. Now listen carefully, the person you arrested was never the final target." The voice on the phone belonged to the vanished person, and your soulmate knew it before they identified themselves. There was no dramatic explanation, only urgency. "Don't say my name," the voice warned. "Someone is still watching the investigation." Your soulmate asked where they were, but the vanished person refused to answer. Instead, they explained why the high-profile arrest had been allowed to happen. The arrested suspect had knowingly drawn attention toward themselves because it was the only way to make the hidden organizer believe the evidence trail had ended. Once the arrest became public, everyone involved would relax, or move quickly to recover whatever remained. That was the real purpose of the note saying the last person would finally move. And according to the vanished person, that movement had already begun. Your soulmate immediately examined the recent photograph again. The unknown figure beside the respected official wasn't unknown after all. Investigators ran the image through older case records and discovered the same person appearing repeatedly at the edges of important events. Never officially involved, never questioned, always close enough to know what was happening. They had even attended an early press conference about the high-profile case, standing quietly behind people answering reporters' questions. Your soulmate followed the paper trail and found that this person controlled a private foundation that had funded organizations connected to nearly every major name in the investigation. More importantly, years earlier, that foundation had paid the legal expenses surrounding the alteration of your identity records. The respected official hadn't been protecting one family secret. They had been protecting the person who financed the machinery that kept it buried. Then the vanished person gave your soulmate one final instruction before ending the call: check who requested the arrest happen today. Your soulmate immediately pulled the authorization trail. The arrest had appeared to follow normal procedure, but buried inside the timestamps was an unusual request accelerating the operation by 24 hours. It had come through the respected official's office after a private meeting with the Foundation director. Suddenly, the timing made sense. Someone knew the vanished person was preparing to reveal the final evidence and wanted the suspect taken into custody before they could make contact. But there was one thing they hadn't anticipated. Your soulmate had solved the case faster than expected and preserved evidence.